Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us on CGTN.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So this is your third year as South Africa's ambassador to China to experience the two sessions. So what topics do you pay the most attention to, and what is your expectations for the government report and policies?
Well, thank you very much for this interview, because this is an important year for us. First, it marks the 25th anniversary of our bilateral relations. And it's a year where we expect more cooperation, and we're also hosting BRICS. But coming back to the two sessions, it is a very important forum. I'm attending these two sessions because it will outline the implementation plan of the policies probably which were adopted in the last 20th Congress of the governing party, the CPC. So we'll be very interested in those plans. We'll be interested in the work because it tends to give us what are the areas of focus of government in terms of the implementation. We'll be particularly interested in the growth figure, because the growth figures of China has got huge implications to the global growth. Right. China's almost shoulders the greatest responsibility for the growth, the global growth, and pulling up, particularly post-COVID. We hope that that figure will help the global growth to continue to increase. And because of the sheer size of trade from China. So that will be the first figure we'll be looking at and monitoring, because it's got clear implementation plan. It's usually met by the Chinese government. They give a figure we normally trust. The second element, you remember, the Congress and President Xi Jinping has been talking about high quality development. This is of great interest for us, particularly South Africa, this high quality development. What does it mean in terms of practical implementation? What does the regional development mean? We know the Beijing, Tianjin, and Hebei, the Greater Delta, the Greater Bay, and development, because we also learn in this approach of a regional approach to development. In South Africa, we started what is called district model of development, where we combine areas instead of just focusing on one area. So which is similar. So we hope to learn and synergize our actions in terms of this regional development. The opening up, of course, is of interest to us, as we are the largest trading partner of China from Africa. The establishment of the free trade area in Hainan, Island is very important. We will be also watching that, what is happening. But more important, we'll also be looking at the press conference by the new foreign minister, and that conference will be Xingang. Is very important because it will sort of outline the details of what His Excellency President Xi and the government has been saying in terms of foreign relations. What is going to happen in terms of multilateralism, global peace, and we are particularly also interested in how the China-Africa relations will sort of be prioritized for this year and next year, in the medium term. So those are the key things we think we'll be looking at as we go to the three sessions. It's a very, very important forum for us, and not only us, I believe, to the whole world. Thank you.
So you see growing importance for multilateralism in the world today?
Multilateralism is, the current global situation is a little bit fragile. And in our view, it needs leadership, really, to make it more stable, more inclusive, more representative. So the multilateralism is what we believe, particularly from South Africa, I think in China, that it needs strengthening instead of weakening. We need more peace than conflicts. We prefer peace to conflicts. I think we share these good aspirations with the People's Republic of China. So we'll be looking at that because China is a very important global player in this field. We cooperate with them in different forums, but what are the plans to ensure that there is global peace instead of wars?
Right.
What are the plans for us to make sure that we achieve what we agreed in 2015, that the UN Sustainable Development Goals as nations, and what can we learn from each other? We're left with few years to 2030. China has done very well in terms of removing extreme poverty, but there are still other elements. Whether you talk of health, education, all those basic services to our people. But more importantly, we're now increasingly being confronted by these new challenges of climate change. They also need our global efforts and collective effort in order to combat climate change. What is important for us is how do we share the technologies, for instance?
Yes.
China is well advanced in technologies, for instance, for new energy, whether you talk of solar, wind,
Yes.
and the Chinese companies are already investing in those sectors in South Africa. But we're still in a transition. We're still relying on fossil fuels by and large, although we're scaling up the new energies. So we'll be looking at those things as a global community in China, how we are advancing the mitigation of the negative impact of climate change. We are increasingly facing disasters, earthquake, floods.
Yes.
They are almost like a daily occurrence, and then lives are being lost. We are affected in our own region, Southern Africa and South Africa. And we just said this month we had a meeting with the Minister of Disaster, responsible for disaster management here in China, where we're looking for greater collaboration. And we hope that those measures will be strengthened, not only between our two nations, but globally, that we need greater cooperation to reduce those risks in terms of our UN commitments and the Sendai framework, which we all agreed in 2015. So those are the things we hope that strengthen our cooperation with China. We'll be looking at how we are actually doing in terms of climate change and transition, just transition. We talk of just transition because you cannot just dump your current program and throw your country or people into problems.
We need a climate justice.
It needs adjustment, but commitment to reach those targets by the set date, whether it's 2060 in China, 2050 in South Africa. We remain committed to Paris Climate Agreement and action plans for that climate agreement.
Indeed. Well, climate change is a big challenge for all humankind, and more need to be done to help developing countries to cope with the challenges by climate mitigation. And
but that's very important because the developed world promise funding, and that funding is not coming easily. The developing countries need funding so that they can have their just transition. And but it appears that now, even as developing countries, including China, we have to play more role in assisting other poorer countries so they can cope with the impact of climate change. We'll be looking at that. China plays a significant role in our continent, Africa, in terms of assistance, in terms of mitigation, and so on. And they've made a commitment that they'll invest more on the new energy other than no more on fossil fuel. So we'll be looking at all those things and how they actually assist the poorer countries in Africa to cope and move from the current situation to be able to adapt to the climate change.
And you mentioned earlier that China's economic growth means a lot to the world. I want to have your take on China's economy this year. What sectors have the potential to drive China's economic recovery?
China has got a huge potential, for instance, in the digital economy. It's growing very fast. It's, as a share of the component, I think it's more than 30% already. So that will continue to spur this high quality development, the green development which is linked to that digital economy and the digital economy. I think they're going to continue to be the key areas of growth for China. I think also this element of expanding free trade areas, free trade ports, that's going to assist China to grow massively this year. And the approach, so those are the areas we think is just beside the traditional things like manufacturing and so on. But to us, the trade in services, I think, are becoming more and more important. Our keen interest is on Chinese tourists. Because to South Africa, they are good tourists. Our main focus of increasing tourism sector, besides the traditional areas like Europe, North America, is China. China is #1 priority for South Africa because they are good tourists. They tend to spend more time, and they tend to integrate with our society well. And so they are the best consumers for South African products.
Indeed, as China recently adjusted its COVID policies, more and more Chinese people are going abroad to enjoy their vacations, and there is a growing interest in Africa. So how does South Africa attract Chinese tourists?
We're very happy and delighted when we selected to be among the first 20 countries for outbound group tourists out of China post-COVID. We have been preparing really for almost a year for this event. Our tourism office here in Beijing and our tourism at home, they've been working very hard in this regard. Currently, our tourism office have been going around cities in China, explaining to the tour operators what are the plans and how we can cooperate. What we think is an advantageous position beside our beautiful sites in South Africa, our flora and fauna, historical site, and so on, is our city life. People enjoy life in the evening in South Africa. So Chinese, they tend to integrate well. Is that the outdoor life, the way we have packaged it and individualized for the Chinese tourists, the way we've used your own technology applications like WeChat to assist the individualization of your own packages when you land in our country is going to be the main attractive feature, really. Of course, when Chinese tourists land in our country, they land usually in Johannesburg, and then they go to Cape Town, Cape of Good Hope, enjoy our wine in the winelands. They take the garden route. They go to our beautiful flowering areas in the Namakwaland. They go to the cultural sectors in the KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape, and then they go to our game and nature reserves and other historic sites across the country. The sports tourism is also very critical for us. We are golf players, and then this year I think we'll be hosting ping pong tournament in my own city, Durban, in the city of Durban, and we know Chinese are the expert in this game, and we are looking for large number of Chinese to, I think it's around May, that tournament, to go to Durban and enjoy ping pong world tournament. So we are really preparing for the tourists. Our tourist guides are now much better than me. They speak better Mandarin than me because they've been trained. They've been trained in Mandarin, so these are just packages to make sure that the Chinese tourists, when they land in South Africa, they're fine. The tourism safety plan, we have created special packages for safety by our government to ensure that while you are still in South Africa, you are safe and then nothing will happen to you, because that has been the concern in the past. This is now being addressed, that you feel free and feel safe, because we've got special packages for safety by our own government and institutions and agencies to make sure that while there are tourists there, you feel safe and you are safe. So those are the things, but we're not only looking for you to just visit and enjoy the beauty of our country. We are having packages for those who like to invest in the tourism sector. And particularly foreign companies, and we're giving some incentives for them to invest in this sector, because it's a growth sector. It's important to South Africa, to tourism, because it creates more jobs. So when you visit South Africa, you must just understand that we are not only enjoying our beauty, but we are contributing to the employment and upliftment of the poor people. So it tends to employ more sort of low-skilled people. They tend to get into that and get more further training when they are there. So we're encouraging Chinese investors also to invest in our tourism sector, and because there's a huge potential. I'm aware, for instance, now we got some companies, we're having chartered flights from Cape Town to Antarctic continent in the south. But we have really a wide variety of packages for the Chinese. What we are doing now is preparing ourselves to increase the airlift, to increase the frequency of flights to South Africa, direct to South Africa. As you know, even during COVID, we had the Air China moving Beijing, Shenzhen, Johannesburg, and South Africa, Hong Kong. We're trying to get South African Airways to move to Guangzhou so that we can transport more people between our two nations. We are very happy about the announcement of China to have other flights from other provinces, I think Shandong, to go to South Africa. So we have to increase the airlift. But what we have seen during these tourist activations, not only Chinese airline, even the other neighbors' airline, they are very keen to take the Chinese tourists. So there's going to be a quite win-win situation in terms of tourism rebound post-COVID.
Yes, and I think tourism between the two sides can also increase the understanding of culture about the two sides.
It's very important, because I think that's what my Vice Premier Shun has been really going to promote with our government. Is cultural exchanges are very, very important. Not only just for us knowing your culture. I'm still learning a lot about Chinese culture. You got a tea culture.
Yes.
We also got a little bit tea culture. We got our rooibos tea, which is very good because it's got no caffeine. But we enjoy this because it's a old culture which we have preserved and continue to modify. And advanced. Everyone now loves Chinese tea. They love the way it is prepared. And because we tend to understand the way you live. And if we understand the way you live, we will tend to be more closer friends in making business deals quicker.
Yes.
So it helps other sectors too, other than just culture, that it helps the economic sector. It also helps us to understand your political system better, because we'll be knowing where you're coming from, why you are taking this decision, why is your democracy model in this way. It's only when we know its cultures, its history, and how we're preserving this history, and how this history, because history and culture helps us to propel us to new high levels of development. If you lose your culture, lose your history, you get lost.
Yes.
And you won't make huge advances and leap forward. So that's a very important element of human development.
Right. And talking about attracting investment, we know China also aims to expand its opening up, and it has launched various measures to utilize foreign capital more vigorously. We know South Africa is also encouraging foreign investment. In your opinion, what experiences can be learned by the two sides?
I think what I've seen is that you must look after the companies which are investing in your country.
Yes.
They become your own ambassadors.
Invite them to teas.
No, they really, our task as embassy is to assist those companies from here in China who are investing in Africa, solve their problems, work with them. And if you do that, they become your own ambassadors, because they'll speak to other colleagues who have got interest to invest elsewhere. Our own president, every year, I think on the 13th of April, we'll be having this year's investment conference, where we attract companies which got interest to invest in South Africa, and the president addressed them. What this program has done is to remove all bureaucratic obstacles for investors to invest in our economy, whether they are South African companies or foreign companies, all of them, we removed that. We created, for instance, one-stop trade shops to deal with everything. Instead of moving from one department to another for licenses here to get these permissions there, we create one area where you can get all those permissions, so that to expedite the process. We've created a special economic zone and industrial zone for new investors to settle in and also do their work and also export if they want to export. We have one of the most advanced financial systems, which is so much well integrated with the global financial systems. So when you invest in South Africa, you can be assured you'll be able to get your profits back in your country without any hassles, really. These conferences, we have seen more and more Chinese companies going there, because we also got special envoys who go around the world helping us as ambassador to explain to the potential investors what do we have in different sectors. There are priority sectors which we put. Yes, manufacturing still remains, infrastructure investment, mineral resources is doing very well because we are endowed with, God loves us so much, He gave us so many resources in endowment. Agricultural sectors, manufacturing, and so that's where Chinese companies, they're investing in all diverse sectors. The auto industries, they are establishing in our economic zones. We meet them every day. So it has been very important for us to make sure that those who are already investing there, they are happy. We solve their problem, and they tend to do well. Chinese companies, like I say, they bring more technologies, into South Africa, but also they do a lot of social investment in the communities where they are putting their production, which we appreciate very well as a South African, because it also keeps stability around their operations. So when we go around the cities and provinces in China speaking doing investment seminars, we also invite our South African companies who are investing here and Chinese companies, and they tend to reduce my work very well, because they'll tell others what they've done. What I've seen in most of them is that they took the risk, they'll go and invest, but most of them, they are making good profits. But also they are contributing not just taxes, but also social investment into the communities. They put a lot of mechanisms, for instance, what we call CAT funding, China Africa Development Fund. It assists Chinese companies to settle in Africa. And most of the Chinese companies have been using that resource to settle in South Africa. And in few years, in 1 or 2 years, they are no more needing that assistance because they are making their own profits. So we've created this good environment. I'll use examples, for instance. In the mining sector, you'll find Chinese companies taking old gold mines and transforming them to be profitable operations because of technology. You will find Chinese companies taking derelict copper mines, which were employing many people, now we're closing because we're using older technology. They come with new technology and they start extracting in the very same called marginal company and make it a profitable company.
Is this difficult to make a mine profitable?
Mining is a long-term investment. It's not just a quick cash.
Right.
But you need more newer technologies to have efficiency in the extraction of the minerals. I think that's where the competitive advantage of the Chinese companies. Also, they tend to come with their own funding, which helps the quicker establishment of their operations. So in all these sectors, whether it's in auto sector, Chinese companies are investing in our ICT sector. Big companies are there in South Africa. They are creating their regional centers, their data centers. So they are really helping us to modernize our economy, of what President Ramaphosa has been calling for. So we continue to encourage them to continue to invest in our economy, and we continue to improve the economic situation in South Africa. I believe even the current challenge, what measures President has just announced and now implementing, are going to resolve the energy crisis. But energy crisis presents an opportunity for Chinese companies. I know they are making a lot, those who are in the renewable, because our president announced also that they'll assist citizens and companies put rooftop solar. So all those companies with solar, they are making huge profit in South Africa. Why? There are other solar technologies elsewhere. Your technologies are more reliable, but they are more affordable. That's why they are entering our market so far and penetrating our market so fast. I've got a personal experience because I was at home during December and January. I could see this happening.
Indeed, considering the energy crisis the world is facing right now, and good to see some progress on new energy front. What other opportunities do you see for bilateral investment?
Like I said, our economy is very well diversified. We are having Chinese companies investing in our financial sector. Financial sector is very big in South Africa. That includes banks and insurances. And that's why we have got big companies like in China, like ICBC, investing a huge investment in Standard Bank, South Africa, and Standard Bank also operating here in China. That's why we've got companies like Discovery Health, which was just a small insurance company, new insurance company, investing with Penguin Insurance here in China, which is one of the largest insurance companies. Why? Because we came with new, innovative, that has Discovery Health, approaches for health insurance. For instance, they had program to incentivize you to keep yourself healthy. If you go to a gym, they pay for your gym. so that's how they partner, and they are doing well, even here in China now. And so these are the areas like the financial sector, for instance, the manufacturing sector. The auto sector is leading in this sector. The other industrial things, South Africa really constitutes almost 40% of industrial output from Africa. So we are big in industries, and Chinese companies are coming into that sector. The agro-processing and agricultural sector, the mineral sector. Mineral sector, even 2020-21, is what kept our growth so high between South Africa and China, because of this large mineral extraction. But now we are not just having old minerals like iron ore, steel, and all those things. And we are having new minerals of high value, besides gold and diamonds. Of course, our diamonds are still there. New diamond mines are still being opened. We encourage Chinese, because they tend to buy more diamonds when they visit South Africa, to invest in our diamond industry and gold industry. But we've got platinum. Platinum is playing more role, and will continue to play more role in the future energy transition. And we have got minerals like vanadium and so on. Now we've just discovered, we're informed in the investment conference this year of the huge reserve of lithium, which in the Northern Cape province of South Africa, which is critical for battery systems. So we're encouraging the Chinese companies to go and invest now in the exploration and mining and then refining of that lithium reserves which are there. So that's just a mineral sector. And like I say, the services, tourism, education systems, and so on. So all those things are very, very, very critical in our economy. So we continue to call on Chinese investors. Come, South Africa is your other home. Come and invest in South Africa.
Some Western media said China encourages investment in Africa to gain political influence.
Oh, I'm not aware where they get that, really, because I've been in government in South Africa. I've been working with Chinese now for more than 2 years. I never heard of that. China really plays a role of mutual respect to us as South Africa and no other African countries. So China never force you to adopt their system. They say take what works with us, and because they understand we come from different environment. And that's why I was saying our president will say we need this from you, China. We need investment, more investment in the green economy, more investment in the digital economy, and because those are the sectors which are growing fast in South Africa, and we are prioritizing. So it's a relation of mutual respect between our leaders, between our government, and between our people. In contrary, the colonial forces, they were not having that type of relation. And I'm happy that now we're working with our partners from the north much better because they understand this. Some of them are still stuck in the old systems, that there should be a relation of mutual respect, a relation where we create win-win situation other than just extraction and taking profits and leaving us in poverty. So it should be a relation of mutual development, mutual upliftment, and that's what China has been doing in South Africa. From our own perspective as South Africans, I can speak with confidence for South Africa that we have had that mutual respect. We never felt being bullied. We were never bullied by China in any respect. Yeah.
I think that should be the cornerstone for a bilateral relationship. And China and South Africa are both major countries in Belt and Road Initiative. And in your opinion, how does Belt and Road Initiative contribute to South Africa's economy? Is there any particular case that impressed you the most?
Yeah, the Belt and Road Initiative, we joined this initiative in 2015 as our government. It is important in terms of trade links. It is important in terms of joint structures for development. In South Africa, for instance, infrastructure is very critical. And Chinese companies down there committing or are in the finalizing plans of major infrastructure like large dams, large roads, rails, harbors, small harbors. That's what we're piloting with, because we want to go to big harbors and modernizing our big harbors. As you know, now we're planning to expand the Durban port. Durban port is very critical for South African economy. It is the largest container terminal in the southern hemisphere, so we just show the importance of trade. So we're busy expanding that port now, and we're calling on Chinese companies to really take keen interest in those projects which have been announced by our president in terms of port expansion. So those are the things, I'm talking of practical things which are being done now. Whether we're talking of the rail in Moloto, the Mzumvu Dam, the small harbors in my own small town of Port Shepstone, in the Western Cape, western part of Western Cape, and other parts of South Africa. These small harbors are not just for fun. Yes, they'll be good for tourism, but also linking with the major cities in South Africa. So that's what the Belt and Road Initiative helps us with, particularly infrastructure. Infrastructure development becomes a connecting tool. Without infrastructure, you cannot trade. And that's why, for instance, the trade routes become so important. And the trade irritation like these pirates, we should collectively deal with as a global society. There's been a lot of confusion about the current exercise by our military called Operation Mosi 2, which is a BRICS operation exercise to see the interoperability of our systems, in, for instance, in dealing and protecting the trade routes and piracy. But other people, they think we are collaborating because there are China and Russian vessels there in Richards Bay. We started on the 17th, it'll end on the 27th. It's going very well, that operation is very important. But some people were interpreting it in terms of the conflicts elsewhere in Europe. It's got nothing to do with that conflict. It is a cooperation between BRICS countries in terms of ensuring that what we have established in terms of trade routes, we can also protect from terrorists, from pirates, and so on. So I thought I should just pass that one, because we are getting a lot of inquiries. What is South Africa doing? Is it preparing for war? We're not preparing for war. South Africa will not invade other countries.
Like
Will defend us, like China. We have never invaded any other countries, but we will always stand there to defend ourselves and increase our defense. It's also not the first time we are having such exercises. We have such exercises with Americans, with the Europeans. Recently we had one with the French and the United States of America. Those are normal exercises, and people know, but sometimes they distort this thing for other purposes. We stand for peace, and we will remain committed to that principle of pushing for peace and stability so that we can grow and trade better together. Yes.
Indeed, it is very important to protect our own interest, considering that even Nord Stream pipeline can be sabotaged by some parties, still unknown right now. Yeah. And you also mentioned BRICS. China and South Africa are both members of BRICS, and this year South Africa holds the presidency. So what can we expect from this year's BRICS?
We are very happy that even last year President Xi thanked President Ramaphosa for support during the chairship of China, which was a very successful hosting of the summit. This year, President Ramaphosa will be hosting in August this year the 15th BRICS Summit. It is important first to understand that BRICS is a voluntary partnership of developing countries who have similar objectives. BRICS has got 3 pillars. The first one is political security pillar, that we are all one peace. We must push for global peace. And 2 is financial and economic pillar, that we should continue to trade and increase the trade. And that's why the trade between South Africa, since we joined in 2010, has increased with BRICS countries. Between 3 to 5% of what was happening before, increase. And mainly with China, I think the trade has been, but with all BRICS countries. And which means that it's a beneficial partnership between our own citizens. And the third pillar of this partnership is the people-to-people exchanges we've been talking about. So as we share this year, we have this nice theme, just so I get it correctly, say BRICS and Africa. But it talks about the theme, about the partnership for strengthening multilateralism, sustainable development, and shared growth, particularly post-COVID recovery. We have put, and our shepherds have met in January, means the senior official from the 5 countries met in South Africa in January, and agreed on the theme, agreed on the priority outcomes which we need. The first one is really just energy transition, strengthening that cooperation, because the climate change, as I said, continue to affect all of us. But at the same time, we must do things which will empower people other than putting them into more difficulties, but continue with our programs for climate change. That's the first element. The other element is on education. Education and preparing our education and skills for the future. We're talking about digital economy. If we don't collaborate and increase our skills for the future and what the future industry needs, we'll find that we will not be competitive globally. So I was very happy that a few weeks ago I attended the meeting organized by the Minister of Education of China, and where we're looking at what does digital education mean in a digitizing global economy. Collaboration, areas for collaboration. So we are looking at sustainable, how do we strengthen multilateralism, sustainable development, and we'll be pushing for real reforms in the global governance system. That's another priority we've identified. How do we work together as BRICS partners to ensure those global reforms, and particularly peace and peace operation, including involvement of women in the peace processes, because sometimes we tend to leave women and they tend to be the worst victims in any conflict. And so those are the things we are putting forward as key 5 priorities for us as we go to this. Of course, the other priority, which stems from the last year's summit in Beijing, is taking forward the issue of expansion of BRICS partnership. You recall that our shepherds now are working very hard on the instructions of the Beijing summit, that let's work on the criteria, what will be the criteria, the guiding principles and processes of this BRICS expansion. Why we're doing this? Because there's a huge interest from developing countries to join this partnership. But we don't want it to be divisive. If we have got a clear criteria, we can then unite the developing countries and the emerging economies. So, of course, our shepherds are working very hard. We hope that the document they'll produce will be a consensus document, as our leaders instructed, that we should try and reach decisions by consensus. We never fail to reach consensus. We work hard, but eventually we'll reach that consensus. There's a lot of pressure, but this BRICS expansion is not a new thing. Since the first summit in 2009, that's how South Africa was invited. So it's not a new discussion. In Bhopal summit, for instance, in India, South Africa was requested to draft the discussion document, which we produced in 2017, but the summit in 2018, Johannesburg summit, they said, let's first consolidate our relation before we move to expansion. And that's what we've done. But last year, under President Xi Jinping, our leaders were starting to say, let's start now the process of expansion. That's why we've got so many expressions of interest. But so far, we've been responding with one voice, welcoming all those countries who are showing expression of interest. And saying we are still working on these principles, the standards, the criteria, and the processes for the expansion. I'm quite confident that our shepherds will work tirelessly. They've agreed at least to put this as a constant agenda item in the next 3 meetings before the ministers' meeting in June, and that some progress will be made in this field. And why are the emerging countries and developing nations interested in BRICS? Because they find it as a progressive alternative to the challenges they are facing currently globally. And that's why they would like also to contribute. That's why, for instance, when we're hosting in South Africa, we had what we call outreach program. When China was hosting, had a BRICS Plus. So the outreach and the BRICS Plus, it tends to invite people outside BRICS leaders, 5 BRICS countries. So which shows that right from the onset, we never saw BRICS as a sole preserve of the 5 countries, or 4 countries then South Africa came in. It was a platform for the developing nations with shared vision to work together for the better world and the better growth, better political and governance system, and more inclusive global governance. I think that's the most important criteria, which is guiding us as BRICS. It is a partnership of mutual respect. That's why people question, why you have to take consensus? You may just vote. We don't vote because we respect each other. It's a mutual respect, and that's how we've been moving and making this significant progress. And we hope that this summit, because it's taking place during the year where, like I've said earlier, the global situation is more fragile, that and this fragile global situation, and we're facing the challenges of recovery from the pandemic, which put more people into poverty, the pandemic which reversed some of the developmental gains. We are facing the challenge of climate change with more disasters, floods, and so on, which is causing more misery to the poorer section of our society and destroying the infrastructure which has been built. So these are the challenges which need strong leadership. And we believe our leaders can also contribute to the global discussion on how we deal with these critical challenges which is facing humanity today. And we are confident that our leaders, as has happened before, they will make significant contribution to the global community in this respect. We are not a bloc for power. We are a bloc for partnership, for global development, and inclusive growth for everyone.
How do you evaluate the role of such cooperation mechanism in world affairs, as we can see the importance of BRICS is rising over the years?
Like I said earlier, from us in South Africa, we ask why we are smaller than all these countries in terms of population and size. And we said, yes, we may be smaller, but our contribution to global affairs is big. Our integration to a global economy is appreciated by our BRICS partners. Our outlook to our foreign policies, you must remember as BRICS, we have got independent foreign policies, all of us. But that's what allows us to find common ground. What unites us, what vision unites us is global development, global cooperation other than destruction, global peace other than war. So that's what basically unites us as fundamental principles that unite us and converge our independent, different foreign policies. South Africa, for instance, like China, our foreign policy is premised on Africa, peaceful Africa, developing Africa, and a fairer developing global community. So peace then became an instrument, a key instrument to achieve that than war. So that's why then we converge so much with China. We've got different foreign policies, we respect each other, but we converge on these things. That's what brings us together. That's what is bringing the interest of so many emerging economies to join BRICS. That's what is bringing the interest of many developing countries to form some relationship with BRICS. And that's why we hope that this finalization of criteria and modalities and standards and processes will really help, because there's a huge interest of joining such partnership with the developing South and developing nation and emerging economies in the world.
Indeed, peace and development should be the guiding principles for the global.
But our leaders really, I'm very proud that when they meet, they're able to take us forward. When they meet, they're able to find agreements on major issues which are affecting the world and take us forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us,
Thank you.
Ambassador.
谢谢，谢谢，感谢。Thank you. You're always welcome. Yeah.